Welcome to a new episode of Conscious Action Podcast. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kayla.
Today we are going to talk about taking conscious action. This is a topic that, of course, is what we talk a lot about. It's the name of our organization, of course, on the podcast. But how do we take conscious action? Where does that come from? How do we know how to choose? And this is something that we have actually explored in some of our events. Actually, our first event ever was sharing about some of our guest speakers' whys. So, what is your why?
That's actually how we started the whole thing.
Yeah.
We wrote the word why on a page because we knew we wanted to do something, but we didn't quite know what it was. So we went with a why, and then here we are, nearly 3 years later.
Yes. So this is there is Simon Sinek, for the ones that don't know it. I think that he is an amazing writer and speaker on this topic in particular. So his book Start With Why is really good. And I find it that most people don't know what is their why. So how can we act when we don't understand where we are coming from? What do we want to achieve? What do we want to do? What do we value? So,
how did we get there?
Yeah.
How did we get to a position where all of a sudden we don't even know why we're doing, it's not like when we were born we got to choose why. And so when do we choose why?
Yeah.
And how often can we choose why? In fact, is choosing why available to you in every single moment? Do you have the right, do you have the opportunity to rethink why every morning, every moment? There's no reason why your why cannot be a fresh start at any time.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like you just mentioned, and I don't want to get too much into it, but I do believe that actually we're choosing in the why before we're born.
Yes. So you're talking on a different, yes, I agree.
Let's stay talking on this earthly plane. Yes, it's super important for us to understand, what did we grow up with? What's the conditioning that led us to this moment? And to understand, do you know your why? Do you know why you get up every single morning and go to work or go to uni or go to school? Do you know where are you going when you're doing that? And I'm not saying that a lot of us are from what I always call an automatic pilot. It's kind of like we are sleepwalking and we have no idea where we are going, but we are still doing it every single day.
Yeah.
And it's
there's no time to think about why.
No,
We just do it. We just
Yeah.
wake up, we put our toast down, we do our thing. And I think, like you say, Brian calls it autopilot. And I was going to say this before. When you introduced the podcast, you were saying the whole reason that we're talking about this is because we want people to take conscious action. And what does that mean? And I thought, actually, it's probably a good time to discuss the difference between conscious action and subconscious action, which is what you mean when you say autopilot, right?
Yeah, definitely. This is the thing of I use a lot of times the analogy of driving, which is the easy one.
Yeah.
It's we can function, we can drive from the office home and then get home and be I have no idea what just happened. I have no recollection of how did I actually get here. And that is our subconscious and our body knowing, all of these things, how to do it. When you're taking the same route every single day, when you learn how to do something. I don't need to be thinking about, now that I'm talking, I don't need to be consciously thinking lips, move up and down.
Yeah, or
tongue,
breathe now, breathe out now. Yeah.
It's that is automatic, and there's a lot of amazing things that come from that. There's I don't want to be thinking all the time on all of those things.
Yeah.
I want to be able to function, but there's a moment and a space for my actions to bring them into the conscious sphere and to bring them into the now moment and actually being able to choose and not just going with it as life is.
And I mean, just to continue with the driving example, like obviously when you learn to drive, it's like clutch in, first gear, everything's conscious. Oh my God, everyone's looking at me. Everything is a conscious thought. And then now, as you say, we've gone into just full autopilot. We can drive with our eyes closed, almost.
Hopefully you're not.
But so there's, like you say, there's an opportunity to become conscious of any action. And that can be used to rethink why am I doing this, and then maybe pose the question of would I like to continue doing this or not. And another benefit of starting to bring things into become conscious of what you're doing is it brings you into the present moment. It gives you an opportunity to essentially meditate, by being in your fully conscious state. And we say that as in not some woo-woo version of the word, but like we're saying, conscious as in I'm aware that my elbows are touching this table. I'm aware of the air I'm breathing as I talk to Brian. I'm aware of everything in this room. Bringing myself into that present moment just frees up so much energy, and it gives it to me to be able to create this podcast. If I was thinking about what time am I leaving? What have I had for lunch? What am I going to do after this? Then I have less energy freed up in this present moment. So it's kind of twofold, isn't it?
Yeah, and I find it interesting, there is this thing, I was just like surrounded by kids recently, and there's a certain age where kids, all that you hear is like, but why? But why? And I see a lot of times the parents being like they can answer the first one and perhaps the second why, and then it's like, oh my God, like I don't know. And I find be for yourself that little kid that is like, oh, I'm going to work today, but why? And then, because I need to make money. But why? Oh, because I need to pay for this. But why? Yeah. And trying to understand the more layers that we keep on asking why for ourselves, we're going to get to a place where we actually run out of answers. And from there, I believe that the real answer is going to come. Yes. The real why is going to come from that place where it's no longer that thought. It's coming from a different place. Yes. It's that deeper knowing.
You can't go any further. That's it. That's your answer. And just on babies, did you know that when babies are born, they are almost fully subconscious? So it kind of it sort of shows you that if you're on full autopilot, if you're on full subconscious, you don't even remember how your coffee tasted this morning. You just knew you needed to get it in so you could get through your day. If you're in that state, you're kind of like a baby. You're kind of helpless.
Yeah.
You're very helpless. You are doing whatever the environment around you is telling you to do. In the baby's case, you do whatever the parent is doing to the baby. In your case, you're doing what your boss says. You're doing what society says. You're doing what your parents told you. You are helpless. You are not consciously choosing your life. And I think it's good to unpack this word conscious while we're talking about why, because I think that word is so bandied about now, but we're talking about it from a science perspective, the conscious mind. We're talking about the active mind that is present, and you could replace the word conscious with deliberate or purposeful thinking. And that's what we're referring to here. So
there's different layers of conscious, and and in terms of how we are using the word, I think that during this episode, during this podcast, we're going to actually be touching on a lot of the different layers, because we are talking about the conscious and conscious mind, the deliberate, the actually creating, and this is what we are also going to talk later on this episode, is choosing consciously what our actions are, and that is from a different place, it's from a place of understanding the impact. So there's so many different layers that we can think about that. And going back to what you were saying before, when we are kids, we start being those sponges, and we start absorbing, and we start getting all of the conditioning from our environment, whether that is parents or friends or whatever the circumstances are. We are getting that, and later on, that is what we are coming from a lot of times.
Yes.
And how this is related to what we've been talking, the why, our values. What are your values? I find it super interesting that most people have no idea what their values are.
Oh, I think that not everyone, but I think most people think they know what their values are because they know what's important to them, and they can rattle off a few words like, oh, I suppose honesty is important, and I guess I like this or that. But so I think that's why a lot of, again, it's an autopilot thing, right? It's like, oh yeah, I must have done my values ages ago. Maybe I did them when I was at school, or like I'm sure I know my values. It's not till you actually press them and say, excuse me, what are your values? They go, oh, fuck, maybe I don't know what my values are.
Yeah.
So you're right, it's sort of like another area where we've sort of become a little bit complacent, or it's conditioning. Our values are conditioned at the start, of course, because we are sponges. We're absorbing everything, and I think that's the exciting thing about sort of waking up in a sense, or starting to have these conversations with yourself, is going, I learned from my parents that or I learned from my environment, say, that the floor would always be there when I got out of bed. Great. Now every morning I can just get out of bed. I don't need to consciously think about what I'm going to be standing on, or whether I'm going to fall into a hole or a pit of lava. I know. I'm conditioned to know that there is a floor waiting for me when I get out of bed. Oh, I also picked up, from my conditioning that success means lots of money. Okay, well, I better go out and make lots of money. I better go to university and get a degree so that I can get the job that pays the most money, and I better not take a holiday. I better save my money, and I better just do all this. Hang on a minute, why? And going, actually, I don't need that one. Yes, I do need to know the ground is there. That's very helpful for me.
Yeah.
That saves me a lot of time and energy. But actually, I don't need to think that success is related to money.
Yeah.
And then you go, why? Why?
Yeah.
Why?
And it's like so interesting. So like if you're like here, like just take a moment to actually think and like bring a piece of paper and actually start writing your values. That for a lot of us, you're going to have to press pause and not listen to us, like, and do that and then come back, because it can be a big task to actually do that.
Yeah.
So, like, because as you said, like, there's so many conditionings that we have, and it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that now when we are putting them, like, in a piece of paper, we can actually see, like, that. And if you are having trouble, like, starting with that, just Google values.
Yeah, write a bunch of words down.
And get a list from there and start making a circle. And just get it from there.
But you can start asking why,
Yeah.
Oh, well, I put down trust because I think trust is important. Why? Why is trust important? Well, blah, blah, blah. And you can keep asking that. But yeah, like you say, it can be quite overwhelming. So Google is good. Just start the process.
And as you say, that why, like for me, a lot of times, that is like, once I have that piece of paper with all of the values, like actually going there and being like, are these my values or are these my family's and my culture's values? Do I actually believe that? As you say, like the example of success is one that I think for a lot of people, like, it's true. Like, is success, money, and power, and I can only get that through working and not taking care of my well-being, not taking care of the relationships, not taking care of like any other sphere of my life other than that. Is that actually one of my values, or is that something that comes from my conditioning, and can I choose differently now?
Yeah, and there's a few things there. One is, if you realize that that's a belief that you've picked up from, say, your dad, in my example, or a lot of people's example, like grow up where the dad is quite a dominant figure in their life and probably like often the main kind of breadwinner. You pick up that value, and then it's going, okay, well, he's got that value from somewhere as well. Did he collect it from his parents, or did he consciously choose that? And either way is totally fine. Why he has that value is of no interest to me, and I do not need to change my perception of him. All I need to do is consciously decide what my value now is. So I think that it can be very easy to blame, and it's kind of become a bit of a trend, a millennial trend, isn't it? Like, oh, we're all in therapy because of our parents, blah blah blah. Well, if our parents could go to therapy, they'd probably be in therapy because of their parents, and they'd be in therapy because of their parents, and it's no one's actual fault, because when you're a parent, all you're trying to do is the best for your child, and all you've got to work with is what you know. So there's actually nothing wrong with being conditioned in a way that you disagree with anymore. It's just time to part ways. It's just time to start fresh and
to consciously choose.
But again, say you're doing this exercise and you go, okay, well, that's actually not one of my values. Money or success is not one of my values. But I don't know what to replace it with. That's fine too. You know, you might just decide, holy shit, I've been carrying this value or thinking this is my value for so long. I'm just going to sit now for a while with the fact that it isn't anymore. I don't need to quickly replace it with something else. And I don't even need to really understand it. I just need to know that it doesn't resonate with me anymore, and I have the opportunity to turn it into something else when I'm ready. So I think, like, if you decide that the values that you thought you had are no longer your values, don't panic and think that you all of a sudden need your new values. Take time to just feel out what resonates with you. What does the world look like if this isn't my value? What does my life look like if I don't wake up thinking this is the most important thing? What do my relationships look like if I realize that actually this is really important to me? X, Y, Z. Just start asking questions and exploring, and that gives you an opportunity to start fresh. And like I said at the start of the podcast, you have these opportunities to ask why at any moment.
And I think that it's so important, as I said, to be okay with actually learning what we don't want, what is not.
Yes.
Like, a lot of times, actually knowing what I don't want from life is as important as knowing what I want from life. A lot of times, it's actually the exercise that we need to make is like, I don't want to be like that, I don't want to be like that, I don't want to be like that. And that starts opening up more space for them figuring out, what do I actually want?
If you insert compassion there, right? Because it's like, oh, I don't want to be like that, I don't want to be like that, and I don't want to be like that. Well, fuck you and fuck you and fuck you. Damn you for making me think like that, blah, blah, blah. Well, now I don't know who I am, and it's your fault, and it's your fault. No.
Yeah.
If you want the openness, if you want the opportunity, you needed to say, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you. I cut the tie with that value or whatever it is, and now I am free. And now I have the opportunity to expand. It's just so important that you do not hold any grudges for conditioning.
And like, I mean, I know from my own experience, I grew up and I know that, like, I don't remember a lot of things from when I was like a really little kid, but from when I was a teenager, like, I remember with my grandpa, my dad's dad, I actually didn't have a really good relationship, and then with a lot of things I learned from him how not to be, and how not to behave, and how not to go through life. And at that moment, when I was younger, I was actually like seeing that as super negative, and kind of like I was doing that, and even if I wasn't telling him, like, I was like, this, I was judging that. And then I had to do a lot of work of forgiveness and gratitude. Forgiveness, because that was, as you mentioned before, he was doing the best that he knew how to do it. And B, like, also, like, allowing myself to understand, like, now that I know that, thank you. Because now I know how I want to continue. So thank you for showing me this. I'm doing a lot of forgiveness work around my relationship with him, because I'm alive because of him. Because he was able to survive through the Second World War, and like, I am here. If it wasn't for him, I'm not here, and that's the most important part. So just understanding a lot of times that, as you mentioned, and this comes all the time, and you're going to hear this in this podcast, compassion. Super important to understand that piece of the puzzle. So like just keeping that in mind as we always talk about things. Sometimes we might forget saying it. So know that every time that we're talking, compassion is underlying everything.
Yeah, bold, underlined,
Yeah.
boom, boom, flashing lights. I actually have a similar story that I might share as well, but in case other people resonate with it. I'm the oldest of 3 daughters and a son, but I'm the oldest of 4. I clashed so hard with my dad, probably from maybe, I don't know, in my teens, very normal. And then as I got older and I started to question some of my own conditioning and started to sort of choose more around more things that I wanted to do or the way I wanted to live, that feeling of like I felt isolated. I felt like my family didn't approve of the direction I was taking. And a lot of it was self-inflicted. I created that isolation because I think I held this judgment of, well, you guys all think about it like this and I think about it like this, so you must not approve of me, which actually caused a lot of just a bit of like bit of icky resistance-y sort of stuff, and so that's been one thing to kind of navigate. And the other thing is that my dad is super driven. He's so driven, and money is important to him. But when I break down his why, whether he has or not is irrelevant. When I think about why is that important to him, why is it so important to my dad that I make money? And when I go why, I land on a place where he cares about me so much. I am his blood, he wants me to be okay, and he believes and he knows, and it's not untrue, that with money I will be okay. So if I have a steady job or I have this or whatever. So the other thing that was kind of comforting to me, or comforting might not be the word, but was the positive or of benefit to me, was questioning my own or doing my own questioning of why my dad might hold that value, and trying to unpack what was the essence of it. And when I got to the essence of it, I realized it was love. On the front, it was money. On the right underneath it, it was love. And that helped me so much with that compassion. So that was a cool little exercise. So take that or leave it.
Yes, and I find like, so when we understand our why, when we understand our values, when we understand what we stand for, how is our everyday life actions aligned to that? So, as an example, I might say, I care about the ocean, and I care about the ocean being clear and not polluted, without any plastics. So it's like, okay, now are my actions, not society, my actions contributing to that pollution, contributing to that plastic in the ocean? And a lot of times I find that when we are not consciously choosing, when we are not acting consciously, a lot of our actions don't align with our values. Now, if we don't know our values, most likely they don't. But once we actually make the conscious choice of understanding our values and our why, we can get to that place of like, okay, now are my actions there? So for example, like for me, I was vegetarian, and one day someone told me, like, why are you vegetarian? And I was explaining, like, because of this, and they were like, but do you know that to actually make that product, this is what happens? And I'm like, oh no. So in that moment, I'm like, I'm actually not vegetarian, I'm vegan. And from that moment, like, I was like, okay, I'm vegan. Like, that was my value. I just didn't have the information.
Right, yeah.
And that is my value. I like, it's not anybody else's value. For me, like, I was in that space, why I cared about that. And a lot of times it's the interesting thing. So for example, like another example, here in New Zealand, we can get bananas, and bananas, for me, I eat a banana every single day. And there's a brand that I think that it's an amazing company, an amazing organization with a lot of my values. And because of the regulations of the supermarkets here, there needs to be a little bit of a plastic sticker. And I try to live as zero waste or low waste as possible. And I'm still choosing to buy that banana because those bananas are organic, they are fair trade, and I know what the company stands for and I want to support that company. So even though plastic for me it's a big thing and it's a big value of trying to reduce that, when in that, which I'm still choosing to buy bananas, I'm in between the options of choosing a little sticker of like a plastic sticker or choosing a non-organic and perhaps not fair trade banana. Between those three, I understand where my values are and how I can make that choice. That's not going to be the same for everyone, but I know I have done this work. I know in that regards, then I care more about organic and fair trade than a little piece of plastic. If it would be perhaps a bigger piece of plastic, then perhaps a different...
It might swing, yeah.
But it's like, I know for me, like, where that is, so I know, okay, that action, I can take it from there.
And see, that example, you know, you're standing in the supermarket, you've got 4 different types of bananas in front of you. You've made a very conscious decision. You've weighed it up because you've thought, okay, this is now in conflict with my values. I'm going to have to look at what options I have, pros, cons, blah, 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 and now I consciously choose this.
Yeah.
And that is one example, you know, of one decision in your life.
Yeah.
As opposed, you know, of millions of decisions that you're making that other people potentially aren't even considering without having gone through this exercise. And another point, like I was just thinking as you said that, an example in my life at the moment, you know, as a new mum, the balance of values versus my mental health. The exact example, my baby is now eating solids. So I need to prepare food all the time. So I'm boiling vegetables, I'm mashing them up, I'm putting them into the freezer, I'm blah, 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 blah. And then I feel like I've done, you know, a month's worth, and they're gone in 3 days. So like I'm doing it. I've never bought a plastic pouch, one of those squeezy pouches. But I have bought some of those jars recently because I was getting so overwhelmed. I felt like my whole day was, you know, get him up, feed him, clean up the mess after feeding him, change him, put him down again. I wanted to get outside. I got everything ready. I'm about to leave the door with the pram. I'm like, yes, everything's all good to go. And I've forgotten food. And I haven't defrosted something. Or I haven't made a batch. And it's like, oh my God, can I just not go outside today? Where am I at? And so again, like a conflict, right? Like a conflict in, I'd rather not use this jar. Even though jars are recyclable, I know the energy that goes into recycling, I know the energy that goes into producing the jar, I'd prefer not to use the jar. But the alternative of not using this jar is that I don't get outside today. I get a bit antsy. Maybe this has happened 2 days in a row. I'm stressed because I'm trying to cook food and he's clinging to my leg and I can't move around the kitchen. You know, there's so many things. And so in this instance, and it was prompted by, again, by support from my lovely sister who said, you know what, just go and buy a jar. Like, coming back to what we were talking about before with kids, you know, what kind of impact am I having on my son if I'm running around stressed or I'm crying that day because I just needed to get outside and I couldn't? You know, there are other things at play. So a similar example where like I made potentially, it was still a conscious decision. It was a decision I maybe preferred not to make, but it was made with, maybe in that case, like you preferred fair trade and organic over plastic. Maybe I preferred my mental health and my sort of commitment to being a good mum over my commitment to reducing my waste. So.
And I think this is the interesting thing where we are nowadays as a society and where hopefully things like will be different, that the fast pace that we're living in, the production levels that we have, the use of single use items and products, if all of that starts to decrease and we can start living a slower life and with a more and these are topics that we're going to talk in the future, like more of a circular economy, and understanding like how like all of that works, then perhaps the impact of having a chair, it wouldn't be as much as what it is today.
Right, yeah.
And then it makes our lives a little bit easier, and especially like for those of us that understand our values and are more aware and have done perhaps a little bit of research and understand the impact of the different things, a lot of times it can be tough. Like I know, like I'm in a position where I have done so much work on myself that I'm okay when there are days that I decide, like I'm not going to have dinner today because I cannot find any vegan and like package free place. And I'm okay with that. Most people are not going to be okay sometimes with that, or most people struggle actually with these decisions. I've been in some Facebook groups with people that like actually I'm like, oh my god, I want to kill myself. Like I just ate something and it had like this product that I don't that I don't want, and it's like compassion, like being okay with ourselves when we don't make either unconsciously the right choice, or even if it's consciously. Like I know I want to reduce my impact as much as possible, but again, I care about my family. My family is not living in the same place than me, so if I need to see my family and not just through Skype, I need to fly, or they need to fly. So I understand the impact of flying, but I'm still actively choosing that. I'm doing as much as I can on every other aspect of my life to reduce my impact, but I'm not beating myself up because of any small little thing that it's not 100% my values. We live we talk about this in a lot of our events. Like if you're alive, you're going to have a footprint, and how big or small is up to you. And not always like we can reduce it to the bare minimum. Sometimes there's convenient stuff.
Of course, yeah, or healthcare, or there's lots of examples where we can't always be perfect, and even if we were perfect in those examples, we're not going to be perfect in other examples. It's just impossible, so don't try. But the other thing to remember when you're panicking about your impact is, and we're getting a little bit off topic here, but we all are a tiny blip on the timeline of the planet. I mean, galaxies are tens of thousands of years old, and we are here for 90 years. We don't matter in some senses. So I guess I need to preface that with like, only apply that when you're feeling like, oh my god, I want to kill myself. Your impact is so minimal from that perspective. From another perspective, your impact is everything. So it's, yes, I realize I just massively contradicted myself there, but I guess what I'm just saying is like compassion, again, reinforcing. There's just no need to panic on your if you're making those choices. But we're off topic now. Let's go back to why.
Yeah, and I think that continuing, there's this sense of like, I'm responsible for my actions. My actions come from my values, come from my why. The more that I understand that, and the more that I keep that in the front of my mind, and the more that I learn, so like researching things online, talking with experts, listening to podcasts like this one, like watching documentaries, the more actually that we care, the more that we're going to do our research. Like I find that like for people that like start like on the zero waste journey, like suddenly like they are going onto this rabbit hole of researching every little thing, and like the same for like veganism, the same for any other topic, like the ones that we are actually like that we care about, we are going to get ourselves educated on
by choice, not by obligation. Like it's actually an enjoyable thing to do.
And this is where like a lot of times like I want to focus on for this topic, taking conscious action, taking conscious choices, it comes from this place of knowing your why, knowing your values, understanding the circumstances, and taking the best available action
in that moment.
Yeah, and making the most of every moment, because, like, as I said before, like, what I didn't know before, I cannot be mad at myself because I don't know better. Other people are not going to care about the same thing that I care about, so I cannot say to everyone, you should be doing this exactly like I am.
Should be buying these bananas.
Yes, because not everyone cares about the same things. Now, perhaps they actually care. I believe that everyone cares. I believe that humans, by nature, we all are caring, loving people. We just have been conditioned so much, and we are a lot removed from our connection with ourselves, with others, with the environment. The more that we reconnect, the more that we understand our impact, the more that we understand the impact that each action has on myself, that then on my community, and then on the larger community and the environment. The more that we understand our place, the easier it is to actually be like, oh, okay, now I can do that, or now I need to educate myself on that to be able to take that next step. And always starting with what's the next step, what's that one conscious action that I can take, and not overwhelming myself. Like, most people are not going to be able to change like that, like from one day to the next, suddenly, like, I'm going to go zero waste and I'm going to reduce every little piece of plastic from my life. And like, some people might, some people that might be a journey. So understanding that even though you might now have a better understanding of your why, might now have a better understanding of your values, taking slow movement and action might be the way for you. So being compassionate during that period as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's every little decision, isn't it? And the little decisions also contribute to the bigger decisions, because I'm just thinking, you know, if you're faced with, you're made redundant from your job, or let's say you're in a job for 2 years and then all of a sudden you witness something within the company, or something all of a sudden clicks and you go, oh wow, I really disagree with that. Then you've got a choice to make, you know. Is that the value of that company doesn't align with my personal value. That doesn't necessarily mean I've got to quit my job, you know. It doesn't necessarily mean, oh my god, I've got to get out, like I'm never going to eat bananas because of this plastic. We don't need to be drastic. But it just opens a conversation with ourselves, doesn't it? And then you make the decision. Like, for example, I'm in a job I don't really like anymore, or it doesn't align with my values anymore. However, it's paying my mortgage that supports my children. Now I'm in a dilemma because I feel like I can't undo my mortgage payments. I can't change that. So I guess I have to stay. I've got to stay in resistance to this stupid company. So now all of a sudden I hate my job. I'm stuck in my job because I have to pay my mortgage and I don't like this company anymore. That is not a position that's going to be healthy for you. That's called resistance. That's called being stuck. So in those situations, I feel like this age-old kind of question of acceptance or change, you know, just really thinking like, what options do I have here? Can I change the job so that I can still pay my mortgage and find a job that suits my values?
Yeah, and I actually think like that specific topic that you just mentioned, we can actually do a specific
on if you hate your job.
on that, because this is like one of the things that when I'm working with businesses, a lot of times I talk, and with a lot of my clients, it's a very unique position to be when we figure out like, I'm now I understand this is not my place, but as you say, like, this is supporting all of my other things. So how do we navigate through that? I think that amazing topic to go through for a full episode coming up. And I just want to, like, as we start getting towards the end of this episode, like, just a few final notes about taking conscious action is start questioning from a good place. Start questioning again, what is your why? Why that? and why that, and why that, and why, and why, and why. And once we get to that place again, unpacking your values, what do you stand for? Do you care about this or that? And once you understand those, do you care more about this one or that one? Like if you need to actually choose. And then we start understanding more that, and the more that we learn, then the impact of our daily life actions, how do they relate to our values? Understanding that it's not always going to be perfect, but understanding that we are doing the best that we can with the information that we have at this moment, and what we didn't know before, we can't be mad about. The same with other people. So just working on that questioning and that education and that compassion.
Yeah, it's a very simple process to go through to become a lot more conscious in your life, isn't it? You know, decisions that were perhaps before this podcast subconscious or unconscious can very quickly become conscious with this exercise. If you know your values, then something as simple as grabbing a bag of bananas or a bunch of bananas becomes a conscious decision that wasn't before. And that's just one example of many, as you're saying. So very simple exercise to make potentially profound changes in your life, and you only need a pen and a paper.
Yes. And also, as we always say, the ripple effect that our actions have for our lives and for others that are seeing how we are living, and then people perhaps are actually asking us why we are doing that, and asking and seeing like, oh, that's possible, that is going to have a huge impact on the world. So knowing that what we are doing is taking that next step, that next action, day by day, the best that we can. So any last thing?
Well, I was just going to add to that. So like you say, making a conscious action, it creates a ripple effect. You're by default sort of starting to condition those around you to start questioning. So yes, your actions create a ripple effect, but also underneath that, the fact that you're taking valued decisions based on values, just even that decision has a ripple effect.
Yes.
Like I know by spending time with Brian that he's going to make authentic, value-based decisions. So whether I actually feel the ripple effect of the decision itself is one thing, but I also feel the ripple effect of being around a person who is acting from a place of value. So that sort of just reiterates that you might have different values from a person. Your actions may be different from a person, but if we're all actually acting with values, like from a place of our values and taking conscious action, that alone can have a huge ripple effect. So I think there's sort of like another level to that. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So let us know all the time, like what are the topics that you would like us to talk about, share what are the learnings that you're having from this episode.
Share your values below. Yeah. Let's get the community talking about, what's your one value that at the moment, in this moment in time, is really important to you. Drop it in the comments below. Let's see what the values of our audience are. Let's celebrate the values with understanding, and also let's see the broad range, Drop in that first word that comes to mind. Whatever it is, just whack it in there. Don't worry about being judged. Don't worry about anything. Just put your value in there, and let's see how different people's values are, and let's celebrate that as a community.
Wonderful.